we'll have to move on to our second presentation from Professor Simon Mahoney, who is in the chat room already, I believe.
Yeah, I'm here.
And let me make you co-host of the Zoom room, and then you could probably test your slides, and then I'll introduce you as you work on that.
Hang on. Yeah, here we go. Hang on. Trying to share the screen. It's not giving me the screen I want to share, unfortunately. I shall try again. Hang on. Now I've lost you completely. Zoom is wonderful when it works, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done for the previous presenter.
When it works, yes. We do see your slides.
Yeah, but which one do you see? You see me, and I can't see you. And they're moving, yeah? Okay. Do you see the main slide, or do you see
Yes, we see the main slide, but also the upgrade, yeah, that window there. We're now seeing your speaker's view right now.
Oh, no, that's what I was trying not to do. Okay, stop share and share again. I want to share the other one. Oh, share screen 2. How's that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yes, yes. There we go. Great. So let me introduce Professor Simon Mahoney. He is a professor of Digital Humanities and the executive director of the Research Center for Digital Publishing and Digital Humanities at Beijing Normal University at Zhuhai. And he is a visiting professor also at Peking University and an emeritus professor of DH at University College London. He was instrumental in the establishment and development of the successful graduate program in digital humanities at UCL. And he worked as the program director from its launch in 2011, took over as center director in 2017, and moved to Zhuhai, to this part of the world in 2020. And he has lectured extensively and published widely on education and pedagogy in the developing field of DH. He's now joined the team at Zhuhai to help develop the research center there and to make it an international one. And without further ado, let's welcome Professor Mahoney. And we still see your speaker's view again.
Yeah, I'm not clear which one.
This one, yeah, this one is the slide. Yes,
that one is the slides. Okay, yeah. So I may turn my head from side to side because I've got 2 screens. So I'm not talking to somebody next to me. I'm talking to you. But thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak at your event. It's really great to be able to be here online, even if not in person. The title, Reflections and Close Encounters, these are thoughtful and deliberate because I am going to talk about reflections and I'm going to talk about close encounters rather than particularly direct encounters. But I'm currently at, as introduced, at New Research Center for Digital Humanities in Zhuhai. And before that, I was at UCL, Center for Digital Humanities. And if I've met some of you at events, it's probably from there. Oh yeah, I still have a page up there, so you can go and have a look at all my staff pages. You can go and find me online if you want to find out anything about me. But I have been a regular visitor to China since 2014, when I volunteered to come to the CSC Graduate Scholarship Fair in Beijing to represent UCL. And this is when I discovered the wonderful warm welcome that you see in China, and also the delicious food. which has seen me come back year on year on year and responding to any invitation. But what you'll see is that these have become more and more frequent, with 17, 18, 19 going from 4 to 5 trips, including Wuhan in November 2019 and Guangzhou in December. 2020, all in-person events cancelled, including things I had arranged at UCL, but I managed to get to China in November of 2020 and come to Zhuhai after quarantine. I look at this one. I mean, this is the Peking University Digital Humanities Forum, and I know I'm actually looking here. See all the people sitting there, right? Happy days, we remember this, right? And if anybody went along to 2019, yeah, funding cuts. This is before the pandemic. What can you do? But very fortunately, they have a new dean who's fully supportive, and we hope that that will see more and more activity there as well. And of course, the first national Chinese Humanities Conference in Dunhuang in 2019. Again, look at all those crowds of people there. Isn't that a great thing to be able to go back, I think, to that and to reminisce? Because it's at these events, the online events like this one are great. You get to share information, you get to understand people's projects. Don't get to meet people in an informal way. 2019 was the first one. 2020 was moved online because of the pandemic. And I've not heard about 2021 and 2022 if there are any plans for that. So please do contact me if you know anything about that. But since my time in Zhuhai, which is since last November, there have been limits to travel and also further restrictions to foreigners. If any of you are watching are also non-Chinese. There are other restrictions imposed. We did manage a combined in-person and online event in our new center in December 2020. December I managed to go to Guangzhou and March to Guangzhou and Shenzhen, but these were not university events. These were to see friends, but business events, or B2B, as we like to say. I did manage a successful trip to Shanghai, visited friends in the library, Shanghai University, CAA, and Shanghai Normal. But when I went to Beijing in May, different story. I got admitted to Peking University in Beijing, Normal University, but all these other places were closed to foreigners, you know, to the extent that I was not able to enter Renmin or the municipal archives, any of the normal places I would visit. I did, however, manage to attend AI conference in Xi'an in May. The conference we had here, scheduled for June, was cancelled, postponed. I'm not quite sure what's going on. So here we go, the best laid schemes. We set up all these plans, things that we're going to do, plans I certainly made before coming to China. And the pandemic has forced changes, and it gives us huge difficulties now in making plans for anything that involves mobility, transport, meeting physically with other people. The two things I was hoping to do, my schemes, if you like, networking and recruitment. Networking, connecting with established relationships that I've got all across the digital humanities centers in mainland China, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Nanjing, in Wuhan, in Hangzhou, everywhere, right? These are existing relationships that I've been developing over the years. But I was also hoping to make new connections and develop new relationships within the wider region, including, of course, my close neighbors in Hong Kong, and also all the folks down in Taiwan. And I know they're very, very vibrant. Digital humanities communities in both areas, and I have many contacts in different universities in Hong Kong. The other plan was, of course, for recruitment, to recruit postdoctoral researchers and use my personal connections for this, which is not really possible because of visa issues, again, for foreigners. Also supposed to be recruiting junior staff, young talent, but it's not been possible to have any wide-scale promotion really on any of these things. So we have the new research centre, which is great. It's part of the wider development of the campus here in Zhuhai, and part of the special economic zone, if you like, that the government has set up with Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, and also to include Shenzhen and more. So there is huge opportunities here for connection, for collaboration, for working together within this special economic zone, which unfortunately have been restricted by the pandemic. And one of the reasons I was so keen to come to Zhuhai is because of the wonderful bridge that connects with Hong Kong. So I thought this is going to be very, very easy to come and see all you folks in Hong Kong. And then, of course, very, very easy for me to travel home to London from Hong Kong, but border shut. And again, you know, further restrictions on foreigners, non-Chinese citizens. So all the anticipated visits, all the plans that I had, all the schemes I had, not possible anymore. Well, not currently possible. So this is why I was showing those pictures of the conference with all those people there. One, to show, yes, that is me there in attendance. And yes, I have been to all these major digital humanities conferences in mainland China. And how now do we engage with other DHs? Because there's no real substitute for in-person contact. It is meeting people at events. It is the casual contact that we have in the coffee breaks, in the dinners, when we go to the bar, whatever it is. It's these very, very casual visits that bring people together and enable cooperations and the start of the transfer of ideas. In the online forum, we get the major constructed ideas, if you like, but it's not the exchange of the informal thoughts and ideas. So I don't want to dwell on COVID, but we need to think about what's changed in this new environment. And I think, again, to reflection, it's necessity of learning new ways of working. We are having to find new ways of working within the new environment, but also importantly, new ways of working together. How do we work together? How will we work together? This is going to be with us for a long time to come. We need to find new ways of working together, but also think about how we can engage with others in a less formal way. So how do we respond? Well, still an open question. We're still learning how to do this. We don't have the answers to this yet at all, nowhere at all. We're still learning. But one thing this is doing is giving us a time to appreciate the digital humanities and what it offers to us in the way of online resources, digital resources, these things. Again, reflections, bringing my interest here when I moved to China. So picking up previous topics of interest, those of you that have heard me talk would have probably heard me talk about diversity, diversity in language, diversity in research topics, diversity in gender, diversity in demographics more generally as well. Education, what have I been finding out here? Well, I've been finding out the difference between Socratic and the Confucian approach to education, the difference between didactic and knowledge transfer in these sort of senses. Classical studies, my original major was in classical studies before I moved to digital humanities. Been looking at topics of study and with all these things within a Chinese context, development of topics and research interest. So thinking about diversity and thinking about East and West, thinking about areas of study, I think we're both moving away from text-based studies, where text is a source data. And we just heard this from Jen Qing, previous speaker. We may be still using text as our source material, but we're now starting to work with it in different ways. Diversity, linguistic diversity, preponderance, hegemony, if you like, of the English language. How do we move away from this I found even coming to China that there's pressure to publish in English, and the pressure to publish in English distorts the metrics. And again, I've got other talks and published material on this. Gender balance, gender diversity. I think these are significant issues everywhere, not only in China, but also in the West, in Europe, USA, still issues here. Thinking about, again, East and West, thinking about the differences in the types of data that we work with, and the differences in our approaches. Looking back historically, you have the technical challenges with using Chinese language. Things like word segmentation have always been difficult. But these issues are not unique to Chinese language. And on the right-hand side of the slide here, I've got an example of scriptura continua, which is Latin. But it's everything is in uppercase, and there's no gaps between the words. So we have these issues with ancient texts, ancient inscriptions, particularly also, and also many Indian languages from the Indian subcontext also have difficulties with word segmentation. What I do see is that we both use mixed methods approaches, and both, I think, the East and the West are moving away from what we've seen in the past of the rigid academic boundaries. We're having much more cross-fertilization. Again, from changing the speech just a few minutes ago, we see different types of study coming together. We can see even the changes in the names. When I started in this field, we used to call it applied computing. Yes, using the computer as a tool to aid a humanities scholar in research. Sort of moved to humanities computing, which I guess had a more clear and complete focus for informatics, building on the traditions of textual and language-based scholarship. And we had this move to digital humanities. We can see this with the publications I've got at the bottom, the introduction of the companion to digital humanities in 2004. And we got the new companion 2016. But digital humanities, to me, is far less limited. Much broader vision for the inclusion of all digital scholarship within the humanities. It's an equal partnership between humanities and technology. Both share research agendas, even if it's based on textual scholarship. I think a difference here is in the West. There is still a focus on Anglophone world. We do see scholarship, for example, on China from other areas, but the bulk of it is focused on the Anglophone world and on our own Greco-Roman heritage, if you like. Now, I stole this from Lickhan, thank you very much. Long history of digital humanities in China, but not framed as digital humanities. I think that's the difference. I think the moves are very similar. We've seen, starting with digitalization, full text databases, but the sources that we have are different, and the sources influence the direction that we take in the East and West. Now, the linguistic systems are very different. And my Chinese PhD student tells me that there are 50,000 unique Chinese characters and more than 7,600 common characters. But the linguistic setup is different in the sense that the character is more analogous to a word, and in the West, the word are made of a collection of symbols, a collection of letters, if you will. But looking at the absolute numbers, ancient Greeks got 24, classical Latin 23, modern English 26 characters. So if you have uppercase and lowercase, you can double that to 52. But 7,500, ouch. So on the right, we have again, this is from Gao Jin, my PhD student, an image of an early Chinese typewriter. And of course, the standard typewriter, the keyboard that we all have on our computers and laptops are Western in style, developed for the West. And I give you the ASCII came in 1967, Chinese characters include 1980, and you've got the Unicode, but again, that's hand characters in 1990. So we have the digitization of Chinese classics. Not going to go through all these, but I mean, things like Dream of the Red Chamber and studies of authorship studies. This is very similar to studies that we have in the West about Shakespeare. Who authored these plays? Was it Shakespeare? Was it Marlowe? Was it Thomas? I'm sorry, I can't think of the other name. But we've got three possible authors for many of the plays. We've got things like digital Dunhuang starting to appear in 1990. Of course, CDDB, machine readable, Chinese text project, and many others. But what I'd like to focus on a little bit more is this move that we both have in the East and the West towards the open agenda. A reaction, if you like, to the high cost of subscriptions and the monopolies of some of the publishing companies. I see the Chinese government getting involved in the drives towards supporting the open agenda. But the important, and we have the National Social Science Database from 2013 in China. But what is important is not only open access for the publications, but also open access for the research data on which that is based. Doing a little bit of research, I'm sorry my screen has chopped some of this off, but this is a UNESCO Global Open Access Portal. And China has its own page, great, and you've got links there on the right to open education resources and various other things. But the figures here need updating because when I did independent research on the different sites mentioned here, I found 96 open access repositories, 60 noted an open door, and directory of open access journals. I found, here we've got slides here, this is 60 of the listed in open door. But when it came to the open access journals, I found 138 published in China. But when it listed languages, it said 41. So it's not clear to me what the remainder of that 138 are. I'm assuming that they are published by Chinese publishers, but they're in English and other languages, I guess. I need to do more research on them. But fundamentally, you have the research output up there available, but without the data, it's not possible to verify the results. Without the data, we cannot reproduce the evidence and the methodology. It's not possible to verify the results of that research, which should be the cornerstone of all scholarship. So what is very, very pleasing to see is to see research data repositories in some of the Chinese universities. I found this one at the PKU, and thank you very much. It's also bilingual, it's in English as well as China. So I can look at it and I can find stuff. It's listed up here by the JISC, the UK project page. There's also one at Tsinghua, but that's unfortunately, this is a metadata in JISC Open Door, but the actual repository is in Chinese, so I can't actually go through that. I want to just briefly mention my original major, classics, because I'm starting to do a little bit more research here. And classics in the West really is a focus on Greco-Roman world. It's expanded now to Persia, Hellenistic, even to Chinese, but the bulk of classical studies is looking at Greco-Roman world. But the major parts of interest, philology, literature, history, philosophy, and art, these are mirrored, I think, in the study of Chinese classics. The difference being that classical studies in the traditional Chinese sense is referring to the classics of Chinese literature. So whereas in Europe, we're looking back to, if you like, a foreign past on which our culture is based, in China, this study of classics is looking on the Chinese past. And the only thing I've added in there is under art, I guess calligraphy that we don't have. but it's similarly philology, literature, history, philosophy, and art. And I had a big surprise. I go up to the library, we have an English language session. This is in the library in the university here in Zhuhai, Beijing Normal at Zhuhai. And this wasn't there 1 month. The next month, this was there. And with a background in classics, I immediately recognized the Greek and the red. These are low classical library editions, and they are original editions of text along with the translation. And these just suddenly appeared. So I got in touch with the librarian and said, well, who's ordered? I mean, this is thousands and thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of RMB for these. These are maybe 500 RMB each book, right? And they've appeared. And then I discovered that one of the researchers in this group, Centre for Historical Research, requested that they were ordered, and the library dutifully brought them in. And when I have a look at their page, and this is using a translation app, this is using Google Translate, I see that 1, 2, 3 of them list history of Rome as research interests. So when the term reconvenes, I should be contacting them and seeing them and having a discussion with them and seeing if we can work together. We have, of course, the International Alliance of Digital Humanities Organizations. The Taiwanese Association joined recently, as did the Mexican one. There's a nice little space, and I know there's discussions going on in mainland China, and I'll see if we can pick up on any of that. Because we have the major ad hoc Digital Humanities Conference, but this is getting out of control with more than 1,000 people turning up. I've not been to those for several years. It's currently showing for 21 at the University of Tokyo, but they have no details on their site. I don't even know if that's going ahead. And I look back fondly to 2019 conference at Dunhuang, and I really do hope that picks up again the 2020. But what I've seen is I've seen the start and the emergence of digital humanities centers in China. This is the University of Wuhan, which is the first, to my knowledge, from 2011. So it's not that new. We have the folks at Nanjing, we have PKU, we have, of course, a new center in Zhuhai. We have the folks at Shanghai Library. The research centers are not limited to the universities. Have them also in Shanghai Library. Fantastic research center there, great projects. We have a Renmin, we have the first Digital Humanities Master Program. Need to talk to them about that, see what they're doing. A new journal. Great. I just want to finish up on 2 points, and we'll be finishing on time. What's in a name? I mentioned before the change in the name nomenclature for applied computing, humanities computing, digital humanities. We can see this 2004 with the publication of the Companion, but also with the Alliance of Digital Humanities itself. That was set up, and that was an amalgamation of the Association of Linguistic, Literary and Linguistic Computing, and also the Association of Computers in the humanities. So it's a move away from its focus on informatics and traditions of textual scholarship, less limited. And I would say another factor in this, and again we saw this from the previous speaker, was this need for human intervention. The machine does not do all the work. Close reading when you're looking at text, as the previous speaker was, are so important. But what I found interesting was this timeline, and I've put digital humanities, humanities computing, blah, 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 into the Google Books Ngram viewer. And you see we're starting to think about it in 2004, and it takes really, really rapidly moving up in 2016. I think the dip here is because of lack of data. I don't actually think it's going down. But we can compare that with Chinese one, and this is one I got from Wang Jiazheng at Wuhan. And this is looking at the number, date and databases, projects funded by the National Humanities and Social Science Fund of the Ministry of Education. You can read it yourself up there, which shows similar growth at similar times. And also, interestingly here, a trend of major and key projects of the China Social Sciences Fund. And you can see on the left hand of the screen, it's by region, major ones being Beijing, Shanghai, and then down. So it's a major centers of cities there. On the right hand side, by discipline, linguistics is still the major one there. Linguistics, history, literature, and then interdisciplinary research. This is my final one, and this is prompted by the first speaker, Chenjing. And of course, ORCID, distinguish yourself in 3 easy steps. ORCID is a way of open research contributor ID, of making sure that the names are disambiguated, because there are so many similar names of scholars in China. It's difficult to know who we're talking about. Well, ORCID gives you a way to do this. It gives you personal, persistent identifier. It enables to distinguish between scholars with similar names. It makes sure that we get the correct attribution. And here's the thing. If you integrate it with your institutional library, it will automatically claim publications and automatically update metadata for you in those publications in your ORCID page. If you scroll down mine, you'll see it all in there. And it is growing in China. China is now the 2nd largest, but it's something that I would strongly recommend for disambiguation of Chinese scholars' names, which I struggle with, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But thank you very much. And as I said, Close Encounters was a meaningful part of the title. So it's Close Encounters rather than, unfortunately, actual in-person encounters, which I very, very much look forward to once travel restrictions are lifted. But thank you very much for your attention. And again, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Simon. And let us open the floor for questions, both in the chat box. Feel free to type questions in the chat box or raise your hand through the Zoom function, and we'll call on you. But thank you very much for this very personal and insightful reflection and overview of the Chinese DH landscape. Your encounter with it is not without twists and turns.
Yeah, I can't bring the screen up now. I need lessons on how to use Zoom. Hang on. I want to maximize the screen.
So while the our participants are thinking of questions to ask you or typing in the chat box, why don't I begin? I was wondering about the linguistic diversity issue, that you have done so much work on, and I find it, personally quite, sometimes quite frustrating and challenging to foreground the linguistic and culturally specific issues that you talked about within the usual conference presentation format in DH conferences, since that requires already so much cultural background, knowledge of the cultural background. And I speak from my experience attending DH conferences, that it is so hard to make time to talk about the digital element properly. If I want to introduce all the sort of the nuances of the cultural and linguistic background, if at all, such as in the the huge ADHO conferences. So. I was just wondering if it is really possible to globalize DH, right, without radically changing these kinds of formats and structures.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that has been a great concern to me, but also for other practitioners in other parts of the world. And I can remember going to Digital Humanities Conference in Nebraska-Lincoln, so I guess that was 2008. And one of the keynote speakers was Isabel Galena, and from Mexico, from UNE. And she was giving this talk exactly on this topic back then. And I know they have struggles. And when they hosted the ADHO conference, what, 3 years ago in Mexico City, they had proposals in, I think, 4 different languages, and they had presentations in English and Spanish. And what surprised me, I wrote a paper and I gave a presentation in the iSchools conference, the iConference, which is in Remnant. And when I was researching that, I found that for the 2021 project being hosted at Remnant, obviously it was virtual, they had a Chinese track, and they had proposals in Chinese, presentations in Chinese. Fantastic. 3 years previously, they'd run it at Wuhan, and they had a Chinese track in Wuhan, but the presentations still needed to be in English. The proposals needed to be in English, the presentations would be in English, and yet it was a physical in-person conference being held in Wuhan, China, which I found quite ridiculous, to be honest, right? And I think we need to have far more diversity within the conference structure. Now, how we do this is a tricky thing, because it costs money. It costs money. I've been to many, many conferences in China, and the DH one in Dunhuang, and I went to the IFLA conference a year before in Shanghai Library. They had live translation up on the screen. Great, right? I grabbed a student when I was in...
Done manually, right? Not generated by machine.
Was it by machine? I don't know.
By machine.
It was a machine, I think. I think it was auto, because in Dunhuang it wasn't so good. But I've been to other events that are clearly much better funded. And I'm thinking of one, I'm not going to mention the name, but it was by a commercial publisher. And everybody had the headset, right? And they had presentations in Chinese, presentations in English, and they had translators in their back translating that. But this costs money, right? But it's what I think we need to convince people that this is money that's very, very well spent. And it's not only the conferences, it's the publishers. We need to, when we have a research project, we put in money to pay project assistant, postdoc, whatever it is. Nowadays, we have to put in money for conference payment fee and for publishing fee, processing charges, because in the UK, they all need to be open access, you've got to pay publishing charge. We also need to put in money now, I think, in my opinion, for having the translations of the journal articles into the other languages. Because there is so much pressure to publish in English. The papers need to be in English, the publications need to be English, otherwise people don't get academic credit for it. That is the difficulty, right? And we're now in a situation where everything is in, I'm sorry, we were in a situation where everything is in English, right? I think it's improving now, and we are starting to see movement, but I would like to see major conferences where translations, or at least that one that I met you at in a PKU. I had 2 students, one sitting either side of me, whispering in my ear. We have what we call a whispering translation, and they tell me if it's anything important. and of course, a translation app on the phone. But
and I remember doing this for the first one as well. Yes, whispering into
whispering translation.
Yeah.
Because you know yourself, and I've had comments from Chinese friends how hard it is to get a proposal accepted in an ADHO English language conference. Because I've been a reviewer, and I don't do it anymore. and you have to give a score. Yeah? And one of them is language. Yeah? And because there's so many proposals go in, if the overall score doesn't hit 70%, 80%, it will just be rejected. And as a reviewer, you cannot give it a high score for language if it's not written in good English. And that is a problem, I think. Sorry, I could talk for too long about this.
Thank you for this take on, both the linguistic and also the organizational aspect of this. Let's now collect questions from our audience here. Anyone would want to ask? I see one in the chat box from Yan Ren. Is it necessary and feasible for the time being to design and develop an open online platform in addition to open data such that it offers a variety of tools for curating and probing into the data for DH practitioners with diverse research methods and objectives in the Chinese context? So question about open platforms.
Thank you. Yeah, I get the point on that. The issue is these are two different things. For the data repository, what we're asking for and what is happening, and my former institution, UCL, pioneered this in the UK. I'm not sure about the timeline elsewhere, is having the raw data. There's a difference between having the raw data and a set of tools. You need a repository where the researchers can upload the raw data on which their research is based. But you need to go somewhere else for a set of tools. You need a situation where you can download the data set and then apply whatever tools you need for your particular type of research, whether that's linguistic analysis, whether it's demographic analysis, or whether it's biomedical research. You need to think about things like, for instance, climate change or COVID vaccine results, all these sorts of things where what we need and what we want is we want the raw data, not just the Lancet published paper on which that data is based. We need to see the actual data, because there's two things. There's one is verifiability, but the other thing, that creating these huge data sets is very, very labor intensive. It costs a lot of time, a lot of money to do it. And at the end of your project, to have that locked away makes no sense at all, when somebody else may be able to use the data for a completely different project. Yeah, whatever it is. The analysis on the Chinese literature could be used by a historian as well as a literary scholar, you know, and it could be mined for historical detail. The sorts of things that we see happening with Greek and Roman texts. You have two groups of interest. You have the people that are interested in it as a literary work for literature. You've got the people who are interested as historians, defining what information can they squeeze out of it. But then the tools the tools are a separate issue.
We do see quite a bit of potential in combining the two, so the data and also the tools in some of the platforms that are out there. One immediately comes to mind is Docu's Guide, developed at the National Taiwan University, and of course I see Michael Stanley Baker in the audience, and of course Michael knows a lot more than I do about Docu's Guide. You know, he has a lot of experience with that, doing research on history of Chinese medicine, but we do see potential in that sort of combination.
I absolutely take your point on that. The thing is, we also need the facility to be able to download that data separately. right? Without having it locked into a specific
platform, right?
Best platform with a tool.
Right.
And this is the difference. If you have a look at the Shanghai Library data sets,
open, right? Open data platform.
Open ones in there. You need to be able to. I mean, they have a situation where they use linked data technology to put it all together. But you also need to be able to download the data sets for somebody else to work on it for something you hadn't thought about. You know, you set up a project and you've got a research question. You've got your data set, you've got your tools that work on that. And somebody else may have completely different ideas about what they can do with that data if it's really available. Yeah.
Thank you for this. Any other?
Yeah, may I have a question?
Oh, so there's a hand up.
Sure, yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Cui. Professor Mahoney, sorry that actually because I was involved in something else, I missed your lecture totally. But I'm just curious because your title is about the digital dialogues or communication between East and West. So how would you define East and West? Why you didn't say it's digital communication globally, but say it's between East and West?
Because of my experience of traveling to China and participating in Chinese events and conferences. So yeah, the focus, and plus I've moved to China to work. So my interest was specifically on China. I think some of the things and the points in the discussion are equally valid globally. Yeah, but the title I made specifically East and West, as in China. A very, very interesting thing, by the way, that didn't occur to me till I was writing the slides for this, is in the English language, we always put East before West. I don't know why. In English, you never say West and East. You always say East and West. I don't know where this comes from, but I think that might be an interesting route to follow linguistically for any linguistics out there. Why do we say East and West? I don't know. We never say West and East. But to answer your question, it's because of my involvement over the last 5 years with practitioners and events in China, and my move to the new research center here in Zhuhai in China. So it's specifically East and West.
Yeah, the reason I asked you a question because I just finished a piece of paper, and the external reviewer said, how do you define East? Because East monolithic of the whole piece. The East includes different countries, nations, and cultures, such as the difference
you can use the East and West analogy for my hometown as London. You can say East and West in London, it's the same. Or in Europe, we can say East and West. So yeah.
Right. Thank you for this. I guess we only have time for one more question. Any quick final questions from any of you in the audience? Or did you see any in the chat box, Simon?
I just replying to one asking me about manuscript subject ready for publication. No, you just go and have a look at. I just replied to it. Just go and have a look at my publications online. A lot of them are talking about diversity in East and West and stuff like that.
Cultural and linguistic diversity, yes.
Cultural and linguistic diversity, and there's several objects of study, these sorts of things. Just go and have a look at my ORCID page, and you can see them listed there, or go and have a look at my staff page.
Okay. I guess that wraps this up nicely, and I hope we're able to meet face to face, at least among us, given that we are so close to each other, right? Thank you. Thank you for that.